they have the voluntary separation incentive pay, $25,000, $40,000, $50,000 at times for you to walk away and find another career. And people are taking that. You can come back in and dramatically jump up the pay chart. Bill Clinton cut 380,000 jobs in 8 years. We saw a surge in contractors to fill that void. Now, is that going to happen again? Even right now, today, there's over 5,000 open jobs today in the Department of Homeland Security, in the Department of Defense, which is still hiring despite the Secretary Pete Hegseth said that there was a hiring freeze on March 2nd. They're still hiring right now.
So I'm curious as to what you think of the state of the federal workforce right now and what your message is to people that still have their jobs but are worried.
So I think this is a difficult transition period currently with the federal government. And right now we're seeing things that have never been done before, truly unprecedented actions. There's a lot of people quick to point out that Ronald Reagan did this to a certain degree. Bill Clinton cut 380,000 jobs. And Bill Clinton, he did it with this. Ronald Reagan did it with the support of Congress. And that's not what we're seeing right now.
No.
Now, what's interesting is Bill Clinton cut 380,000 jobs in 8 years. What happened is there were voids and there were holes that existed. So we saw a surge in contractors to fill that void. Now, is that going to happen again? Perhaps it may, maybe it won't. We're seeing DOJ looking at what they're calling wasteful contracts, and they've already cut some of these contracts.
Sure.
So that can impact individuals working at the contractor level. But I do think with the current guidance that's being put out to federal agencies where they're only allowed to hire one person for every 4 that leave, there will be voids, there will be holes. We have the current situation is in a lot of agencies, you have people now doing at least 30 to 40% more work because people opted into the deferred resignation. 77,000 people said, I'm going to take the deferred resignation. You have people taking the early retirement, which is when you're 50 years old with 20 years in or 25 years in at any age. A lot of people were eligible for that.
Yeah.
It's something like 1 out of every 5 were eligible for retirement. So you have like 20% that are eligible for retirement. A lot of them are taking it. People that I know, they're taking it. Then they have the voluntary separation incentive pay, $25,000, $40,000, $50,000 at times for you to walk away and find another career. And people are taking that. So you will be left with holes because I don't think people understand what agencies truly do. And what has been the overall focus is you take the federal government, which is 2 million people, and 10% of that, so you have 200,000 people, you focus at the bottom 10% and you say they're lazy, they're bloated, they're not productive, they're doing the wrong thing, they're calling in sick, they're running side businesses, they're not doing what they're supposed to, they're not coming into the office. You can talk about thousands of people doing that because you're focused on the bottom 10%. But you neglect the other 90% that are trying to do the right thing and they're trying to serve the America public in their capacity. So what will be revealed in the coming months is the agencies need more people. So the answer is either going to be 1, fill them with contractors, or 2, allow them to hire who they need. And that's probably what we're going to see. The summertime 2025 is probably going to be the worst of it because we're going to see reduction in forces, RIFs fully fleshed out. They're being submitted tomorrow. Tomorrow, every federal agency has to submit a RIF to OPM and OMB. They're submitting it, and that's when the public is going to have an idea. Everyone will have an idea on who's losing what. Because right now, what you've heard about is probationary cuts, and you've heard about probably the incentive buyouts and the early retirement. But we haven't really touched that much, a little bit on RIFs, maybe like 5% of RIFs. But we're going to get a lot more RIFs. And it's going to impact agencies. Now, the number I just talked about, 1 out of 4, agencies only allowed to hire 1 person out of every 4 that leave.
The GovClose certification is generating tremendous results. So 27 years old, you've never worked in government contracting, you've never worked as a consultant, and you just closed your first deal. Is that correct?
That's fair. And I've got a couple small projects on the side as well. So definitely probably my best investment I've made all year.
It would be my second post on how a cold call landed a 9-figure government contract. My name's Gavin Tice.
So my name is Ethan Mart. when I was able to enroll into the GovClose program, it just exceeded all my expectations.
I was able to get a consulting gig with a software company that currently works with the intelligence community. Hi, I'm Deb Diller Harris.
If you want to learn how to sell to the government, if you want to learn how to start your own consulting business, if you want to learn the skills that you need to go land a six-figure plus account executive job with big companies selling to the government, the certification program is for you. Head on over to govclose.com. Check out our certification program. I love your content, especially I think now it's been popping up in front of me more with like all the federal stuff going on. And probably one of the best, it has to be the best YouTube channel I've seen on federal jobs and the advice you're given. How long have you been doing that?
It's been a little over 3 years now, but really in the beginning stages, it was just practical tips, how to improve your resume, how to do the interviewing, getting ready for usajobs.gov, different strategies, more tactical. And now it's like a reaction to what's happening since there's been drastic movement within the
Yeah.
federal workforce with the new administration. So a lot of it now is more, it seems like reporting on the news or informing people on what the situation is from the federal employee perspective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of nerves out there and people wondering what's going on. And so did you get into that because, so I saw you spent 20 years in the military, right?
That's right.
Did you, I'm assuming what happened is you transitioned out and then went for federal work yourself?
Yeah, exactly. So I did a little over 20 years. Last assignment was ROTC. I was working at a university. I
Nice.
did that for a couple of years, and I was probably about a 3-hour commute to DC. I was in North Carolina. So 3 hours to DC. My mother was already living here. So I started to look at different federal opportunities and just trying to get into it, looking at the OPM website and just trying to piece things together from social media. It was confusing. And a lot of people that retired before me, they were having difficulties with
Yeah.
it. So it took a lot of time, it took a lot of energy and effort to try to figure out what works, what doesn't, what do my skills even mean? I was a combat engineer, so it was a combat MOS. And how does that align with a civilian career? Does it even align? Some people say it doesn't. But some
Yeah.
people say, hey, if you're infantry, you have to be a security guard or a police officer. And that's not true, but you don't know that. You don't really know it. You might get lip service from a couple of people here or there, but you don't really know anything until you put yourself out there and you try to get something.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
where the lessons are learned.
Oh, yeah. I mean, trying to translate your military job. I remember when I joined the Air Force, I was a couple years in, I remember asking, hey, because I was a navigator when I started. And I remember I said, hey, what? There can't be a lot of jobs out there for navigators. And my flight training officer was like, hey, Rick, if you wanted a job after military, you should have become an acquisitions officer. Which, of course, I ended up becoming an acquisitions officer, like through no intention of my own. But yeah, that I can remember going through TAP, how much focus they put on just the resume. If you want federal work, get your resume right, the application, that whole process is a different beast. So I guess problem one, how does your military service translate into a federal job or any job? But then you add the federal piece to it if that's what you want. Because a lot of guys do, they want to transition into that GS or NH job, right?
That's right. The two main things that lead people into it is stability, kind of like in the military where you're wearing a uniform, you know you're going to get paid. You don't have to worry about the layoffs. I mean, right now it's not so stable, but
Right.
historically speaking, it's stable, right? So you have the stability and then you have a pension. And for guys like us that have already served time in the military, you could get an additional pension. So
Right.
there's people that they do their 20 years or maybe they get a medical retirement. So they have that pension, then they go towards civil service in the federal government. You're fully vested after 5 years. A lot of people don't know that. It's that short of a time, 5 years. Now, your
Wow.
pension's not going to be amazing. If you're a GS-14 in DC, 5 years will probably get you probably around 700 to 800 a month, but
Mm.
that's extra on top of your Social Security, on top of if you have a military pension. So it all adds up and is appealing. For a military guy, it comes down to how can you articulate your experience? Because many people that wear the uniform, they've done a lot, right? A lot of
Yeah.
people, they view themselves as the jack of all trades because you have to perform in this duty position, then maybe you get to a different duty station and now you're doing an additional duty that you've never done before. So you pick up skills. Like
Right.
maybe you assist with the S1 HR. Maybe you assist with HR skills, operation skills, and then you're bouncing around S6, which is the info, the communication, stuff like that. So you pick up all of these skills, and now it's on you to be able to articulate and explain where is your value. And it comes down to what you want to do. In the federal government, there's 300 jobs. You could be anything. I mean, you pulled guard duty, you probably could be a security guard. That's low 85. And they all have
Sure.
this nomenclature, right? They all have this number. So no matter what you have done, there's multiple job series that you're probably eligible for. The people I work with that come from the military background, a lot of times it will either they're IT folks, because we have
Mhm.
2210. There's 10 tenants of IT from cybersecurity, infosec, application developer, customer service. There's a lot of IT stuff going on
Sure.
here. Now, other people, they do more administrative. So if you're a senior non-commissioned officer, if you're a commissioned officer, you worked in the S shop, you have administrative skills when it comes to Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint, Word, SharePoint, things like that. You can leverage those and you can get into an admin type position. And depending on your area, they can pay surprisingly well. So in the DC area, San Francisco, New York City, some places in Texas, you can get paid quite well for those skills. And all the while you're earning decent benefits and you're earning decent paycheck, good stability, recession proof job. That was the idea before the last 60 days or so.
Yeah, no, I mean, we experienced the same thing. I'm up in the Boston area and same thing. You can get a great paycheck with the federal government. It was almost a leaving acquisitions. Now I went right into consulting, but a lot of my counterparts will go right back in the military as program managers, as contracting, civilian contracting officers, or at least assistants to stuff like that, engineers. I guess the deal with the devil that you make is you might make a little bit less with the federal job than you would say going to work for a Boeing or something afterwards. But you have that security and you have that potential pension, everything you just talked about, right? The security, the pension, the benefits that come along with being a government civilian. And so now we do have that instability, or people are at least worried. And our audience mainly, if you don't know, mainly consists of, I would say, military, active duty, veterans, and people that have government contracting businesses that are selling to the government. And what we do primarily is we're training people on the government contracting process, but we're really helping a lot of veterans, a lot of people transition and find jobs, civilian jobs, working for companies. We teach them the government contracting process so they can go work as sales executives, business developers, start a consulting business, that type of thing. So that's our focus. And so a lot of people I was thinking about having you on, that the people listen to this podcast, watch the videos, are either directly or indirectly affected by what's going on with the federal jobs right now. But I really think everybody's affected either directly or less directly because even if you're a business seller to the government, like now you're experiencing, well, now if there aren't layoffs in the acquisitions offices that are putting them on contract, there's certainly a tremendous amount of bureaucracy that I'm sure you've heard of too, that they all have to deal with as far as some of the emails they're getting and the justifications.
That doesn't apply to immigration, public safety, and in a lot of cases, national security. So if you have a specialty that's involved in immigration, public safety, or national security, you're probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
If you have a mission critical job within Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, the Veteran Affairs, then you're probably going to be fine. So there's a lot of nuance to it. We're talking about a tremendous, enormous organization that has a lot of different positions in there. I'm still getting contacted by individuals that are interested. And I just talked to a guy that was exploring the disability path. So if you don't know about it, there's something called an SF-256. And if you look on there, there's a couple of dozen disabilities. One of them, for example, is ADHD or anxiety or depression or something along those lines.
Yeah.
If you have that, you can have your medical provider sign a letter that opens up a new pathway that you can get a job in the federal government non-competitively. That means
Really?
you can get the job without it being listed online if you work through the coordinator. Now, he didn't know about that. A lot of people don't know about that.
No,
but
that's the first I've heard of it. I'm a disabled vet, man. I could go out and get that government job. That's interesting, man. Wow. Okay. So you can, if you have a lot of people have ADHD. A lot of people have some of these disabilities that you've listed. First, I've heard that you could go get a non-competitive job. And by the way, like so much to unpack just with what you said, from creating holes that could potentially be filled. First thing I heard of with people, including a lot of federal people that started companies that sell to the government, like, yeah, you might see some delays right now, but we've seen this, everything that we're seeing now, in my opinion, we've seen before. I just feel like it's a lot louder. And like you said, there are some differences, right? There's a lot of nuance to how the Trump administration is doing this versus the Clinton administration, which I want to say, I heard you on another podcast talking about how we filled the hole before with contracting expertise. And I also agree, because I've seen it myself. A lot of people don't realize that the staffs that consider in acquisitions, in the Air Force at least, is a mainly civilian community with some military like myself. Everybody had more work on their plate than they could possibly do. So now you start taking away from the people that were already there doing it, and they were overtasked to begin with. Now you absolutely have a hole. There's no way things aren't going to fall off the table. And historically, we've seen this happen where we cut a bunch of people, even navigators, for instance. I was offered, they got rid of a bunch of navigators during the Gulf War because they didn't think they needed them with GPS. Then I got hired, right, in about 99. So they're like, hey, we messed up. We need navigators. And then about 10 years later, I get offered a separation package, which I didn't take, but it was a lot more substantial. This is what I was getting to. Maybe you know about it, because I haven't been able to do the research on this. I've heard 25,000. I've heard some different numbers being thrown around, what people are being paid. It doesn't sound like a lot to me. I remember being offered almost a year's salary to separate voluntarily back in the 2010 era, a little bit before that. What can you say about that, about what's being offered?
Okay. There's two different things. We have what I've been talking about largely is called VSIP, Voluntary Separation Incentive Pay.
Right.
That currently by regulation is capped to $25,000. That amount was originated and created in 1993. It has not been indexed for inflation. So it would be the equivalent of like $54,000 today,
Yeah.
but it's still 25,000. So it's really interesting.
Still not that much, right?
Still not that much. Yeah, still
Yeah.
not that much. Okay. We have the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission. They're offering 50,000. We have some sub-agencies within the Department of Defense. They're offering 40,000. That is voluntary. You're volunteering to separate. Now there's a whole other thing that is typically referred to as severance pay. So if a reduction in force occurs and you are mandated to leave, it's not voluntary, it's involuntary, you have to leave. That's when another calculation comes into play. And they're looking at how long you've been in there for every week. I think it's for every year, it's a week of pay, all the way up to 52 weeks. So
Okay.
there you could see a lot larger. You can see a lot larger of a severance pay that well exceeds 50,000, and it could even approach 100,000 in a lot of situations. So it really depends on your situation. Do you take the money voluntarily and leave now and be proactive and try to find another job? Or do you sit in the agency, cross your fingers and see what happens? And if you're selected to leave because of a RIF, because of a reduction in force, then you could get the severance pay.
That's tough. That's a tough decision to have to make.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. And what do you think about that decision?
So what I think is there's different type of people that are in the federal government. So it really depends on what your situation is. If you have, like I mentioned earlier, if you have 5 years in the federal government, you're fully vested. So let's say you have 5, 10, 15 years, you know that you're going to get some kind of pension when you turn 62. You're
Right.
definitely going to get a pension. So maybe that's a great time. Hey, I got 10, 12 years. You could do the calculation real quick in your head and say, okay, this is how much money I'm going to get every month. Is that okay?
Mhm.
And if you're okay with that, maybe it's time to jump into the private sector, explore other opportunities. Other people are looking at different levels of government, state government, county government, city government. There's a lot of cities in this country that have pensions, and you can work there, recreational assistant, or do something, assist the city manager doing something
Right.
for a few years, and you can lock in another pension. So it depends really on your geographical location. It depends on your skill set. Are you an IT guy? Are you a finance guy? Is there a
Mhm.
demand for your skill? Are you just a generic admin guy? Because then you might have some additional difficulties.
Right.
And then what is your situation with your pension? Is it already locked in? Or are you at the 4-year mark? If you're at the 4-year mark, you're going to hang on for dear life and wait that 12 months and
Just
try to
hope
lock
so.
in your pension. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that go into consideration on what you want to do. And of course, your financial health. Do you have 6 months saved right now?
Right.
Because the future is going to be uncertain, especially in the private sector. You look over there, you're hearing about layoffs every other day. You're hearing about Meta, you're hearing about Amazon. But really, the best bet, I think, in the private sector is to go towards those smaller companies.
Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunity and room for advancement in those smaller companies. And there's less competition because everyone's applying for Amazon and Meta and
Mhm.
Google. But maybe that smaller company downtown, a couple of miles from where you live, that one, not many people are applying, and that could be the opportunity for you to grow. So that's
Sure.
worth considering too. It really depends on the individual's circumstance.
Yeah, no, those are good points. And you're right. It does depend. And the way I try to frame it for people is with all of the nerves and everything is, hey, why don't we take a look at this, take a step back and look at this from an opportunity standpoint? Because there is opportunity here. There's always opportunity. Whenever you see fluctuations like this, whenever you see upheaval and cuts, we always see something emerge from this, an opportunity that we can take advantage of, right? So if it happens to be that you want to keep your federal job, you may have an opportunity to climb the ladder a little more swiftly because you have people that are being, whether voluntarily or involuntarily separated. There's more work to do. You might be able to take on some of that, and there may be something there. And then, of course, with what I tell people, and if you're anyone listening to this that does have a federal background, government contracting, we were talking about at the beginning, hey, how do you match up your military experience with the job if there's no direct correlation with what somebody at Amazon does, for instance, or one of these other companies? I tell everyone is these companies that are selling to the government, I mean, the government's still the biggest purchaser of goods and services in the world. And despite this acquisitions reform and the cuts, which we've been through over and over again since really the founding of the country, there's such an opportunity there for somebody with a federal or military background to work with one of these companies because fundamentally, if you come from the Army, you understand the Army, you speak Army, you know how to get onto an Army base. And it's just realizing that the companies, they don't know how to do that. That's foreign to them, right? So you combine that with a little expertise in government contracting, which you could pick up in a lot of different ways. Now you could be a very valuable asset to a company like that is selling to the agency that you came from. So, I mean, that's just one example of how somebody might take this as an opportunity to capitalize and go work for a company or start their own business. I mean, there's a lot of different paths. I wanted to see what you thought as far as opportunity that this could present for people in a positive way.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point you just provided. Let's say somebody right now is GS6 or GS7, probably earning about 45, 50, 55,000 a year lower. I might be lowballing those numbers, but let's say around 50,000 a year. If you're a GS7, GS9, and a lot of these positions are on military bases where you're
Yeah.
checking ID cards or you're providing some sort of low level of security and you're worried about what's happening right now. You always have the option of waiting this out to the next administration. So you can jump into the private sector, let's say right now, for the next 3 years. You can look for opportunities, whether it's contracting, private sector, whatever you do, you can go and gain more experience in the private sector. And then, let's say we get another president, things calm down somewhat. You can come back in and dramatically jump up the pay chart. So you know how the military works, O1 to O2, O3, you got the time and grade, you got all these requirements, right? The GS pay scale is not like that,
Right.
where you could be a GS7 today. And then let's say you take a break. You only need a 90-day break, honestly, but let's be realistic and say you take
Mhm.
2 years off. You can come back in after 2 years and you could be a GS13
Sure.
because you just need to show 12 months of specialized experience in order to be eligible for that job. So it's not unrealistic. You quit. Let's say you're a lower level government or mid-level government, you quit, you pivot to the private sector, you spend a couple of years there, maybe the political winds are to your favor, and then you come back in and you essentially doubled your salary because now you're applying for a higher level government job. That can exist as well.
Yeah. Or go get a degree or something if you want to take a year off and go through a master's program.
Yeah. That opens up another hiring path. There's so many different hiring paths, but a student, a current student, that's a hiring path. Recent graduate within the next 24 months. If you graduated for the next 24 months, you have another unique hiring path that enables you to compete for a government job where you're not competing with the regular public.
That's interesting. Okay, so walk me through that because you talked a little bit about it with like, hey, if you have a disability, if you have military experience, who is the person that they're talking to find out about those hiring paths? And is it you? Do they go to your website and talk to you about it? Do you recommend where they go, or do they go to something more official on the government side?
You can go a lot of places. I'll start off saying you can always come to me. So if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see a way to contact me and we can always have a conversation about what path works the best in your situation. So that's number one. Number two, you can do the research. All the information is public. You just have to be willing to invest the time. If you have the time, you can spend the hours and dig through there to figure out what works best for you. For the veteran community, there's so many free resources out there. You just have to go and search which one's a good one, which one's not so good, and you got to figure it out because there's dozens of companies, it seems like, that are targeting veterans right now when it comes to transition. So
Right.
there's a lot of resources out there. It just depends on if you have the time, what is the level of desire? All you have to figure it out. But you can ask me at any time to provide some just general overview of it. We talked about disability. Schedule A disability, your disability is not listed on the letter. So, whatever your disability is, you don't have to be worried about people finding out that you have this disability. The letter simply says the doctor certifies that you're eligible under this path because you have a legitimate disability. That's all it says.
Interesting.
So that's one thing. That's Schedule A. Now, veterans get it confused because they think having a VA disability letter is the same as a Schedule A disability letter, and it's not. It's weird, but it's not.
Okay.
So VA disability, you have to fill out an SF-15 and you have to upload your VA letter that has your percent. And if you do that, you're eligible to take advantage of the disabled military hiring path. That's another non-competitive hiring authority. So there are two distinct, different hiring authorities. You have your Schedule A non-competitive hiring authority. You have your 30% or above disability military hiring authority. Both of them are non-competitive. And then as a veteran, you have more. You have VRA, the Veteran Recruitment Act. So the VRA means that you're either disabled or you have a campaign badge, meaning you deployed in the military to Iraq, Afghanistan, the Horn of Africa, wherever.
Right.
So if you have a campaign badge, you're eligible to that up to GS-11. So you could be placed non-competitive. A lot of people I know took the government up on that offer and they were able to get a GS-11 non-competitively. So you can do that. Then you have veteran preference, +5, +10, depending on if you deployed or depending on your disability. There's additional points that you can gain on your application. So there's
Right.
a lot of different ways that you can look at it like that. Recent student hiring path, that's if you graduated with any accredited program, it could be a certification. Doesn't even have to be a bachelor's degree. It could be a 12-month certification from an accredited university that
That's
opens up
interesting.
the path. Associate degree opens it up. Bachelor's, master's, doesn't matter, opens it up. Now, as a military veteran, you don't have to use it in 2 years. You have up to 6 years if you are able to gain the degree during military service. So they give you 6 years. So your average military veteran, let's say they're disabled, you have Schedule A, you have
Mhm.
30% military disability, you have VRA, you have veterans preference +5, +10. Let's say they went to school. Now you have recent student graduate. That's 5 different paths that many veterans could potentially have, and many of them don't even know of any of them.
Yeah.
They
I
just look.
mean, news to me. I mean, I wasn't necessarily going after GS job, but I hadn't heard of those. Like I know, like everyone goes through a transition program leaving the military, and just goes to show, just like everything, it's a lot more complex than you might think it is after hearing a 30-second news clip from someone that doesn't really understand the process anyway. For the way federal jobs work, for government funding. And you said something interesting too. We were talking about taking a little bit break, come back when they start hiring again, maybe under a new president. I wouldn't even be surprised. I mean, we've seen this administration before. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a 180 reversal 6 months or a year from now, where the message is, hey, we got rid of the folks that we didn't want, but now we're going to hire the ones that we really need. I mean, just because it's known, this administration is known for reversals of thinking like this. So there's really no telling. No one has a crystal ball, but I do think leaving, taking a break, coming back, that's an interesting strategy. And coming back under a higher pay grade as a federal worker, really interesting.
There's something else that I think that should be on people's radar if they're considering a federal government job. The thing is, Doge as an organization, as a government fraud, waste, and abuse cutting organization, it dissolves July 4th, 2026. So next July, what we could see is, hey, We got rid of 1 million federal employees and we saved $1.5 trillion. So you're welcome. That's what we did. And then the program closed down. The
Hmm.
president takes a bow, everybody claps, and then it could be business as usual. That's a realistic possibility.
Well, I mean, look, it always goes back to business as usual to some extent, right? I mean, even when every time there's a new president, funding shifts, we've seen jobs cut before, we've seen government shutdowns, but these are typically, I should say this, we can go back right now and look at the last 20 years of federal spending and jobs and everything else, because most of that is public. And what we'll see is increased spending every year over year. Small businesses selling to the government make more year over year. Government spends more year over year. And even if they manage to cut enough funding where next year is even or a little bit less, there's still tremendous opportunity and a tremendous amount of federal work out there for people. And I do think it's interesting the idea that during a time where the federal government is reducing the workforce, there's still an opportunity to potentially go out there and get federal work in this. Probably not a lot of people thinking about, hey, how do I get that government job right now? Or how do I come back a year from now with an even better federal job?
That's absolutely true. You know that there's less competition probably happening right now just because the energy or the vibe or the attitude is stay away. It's not stable. I don't know. They might cut me. So that really decreases the applicants that are applying for jobs right now. Even though there are some that are applying, it's nowhere near what was applying, let's say the middle of last year. Let's say the summer of 2024. There's a ton of people applying. As far as people I was interacting with,
Yeah.
there was a lot of people that were interested. Now it's a fraction. I would say, if you were to look at last summer, let's just say that's 100%, it's probably dropped down to like 20%. There's been like an 80% decrease in interest overall when it comes to getting a government job. But even right now, today, there's over 5,000 open jobs today in the Department of Homeland Security, in the Department of Defense, which is still hiring despite the Secretary Pete Hegseth said that there was a hiring freeze on March 2nd. They're still
Mhm.
hiring right now. And then the VA and a lot of the sub agencies within the Department of Homeland Security. There's over 5,000. If you're just a regular Joe US citizen, if you're a
Yeah.
veteran, there's over 6,000 jobs right now open.
Now's the time. I mean, now's the time that I hear that and I'm thinking, man, now is the time to go in there. Not when everybody thinks it's a good idea again. Now go in there and go after that. Probably get a better job than you could have last summer.
Yeah, it's like the stock market. When everyone else is scared, it's time to invest.
Well, I mean, that is true. And it's always like, hey, hindsight's 2020. How do you figure that out? But I think in this case where I could be reasonably sure that this is exactly what's going on. I think it's probably a really great time to go in there and take a look at those federal jobs. And same thing with government contracting. When people are nervous, that's usually the time to, buckle down and be smart and listen to what's going on. Like you can't just go after these things without the knowledge, right? So I don't want to get into the government contracting argument here and start boring everyone going through the details there, but but hearing about, like, for instance, the different pathways to a federal job that you were talking about, I didn't know about a lot of those that would be available to me or maybe other veterans. Just doing the research and understanding, hey, now that, and maybe listening to something like this, right? A subject matter expert like yourself, where, hey, the interest is down, but the government's still hiring. A lot of people don't know that, right? That the government's still hiring. Maybe you tried to get a job last summer or 2 years ago and you got turned down because of competition. And now if competition is reduced by 80%, now might be the time for you to actually get in there and buckle down and build your government, your GS or NH career.
Yeah, definitely.
Really cool. That book behind you, Government Job Secrets, is that something that people can buy on Amazon or?
Yeah, let me go ahead and hold that up. This is on Amazon and it's on Audible as well. And it really breaks down the federal resume, how you're structuring it, how you have to have the right style in order to convey your experience. And it talks a little bit about job series. One thing that if you don't read it or if you don't take anything else away from it, from this conversation, if you take nothing away from this conversation and you're interested in a federal government job, your resume has to do four things. And it seems so simple, but people just constantly neglect it or they decide not to do it whatsoever. The four things that you have to show is what did you do? How did you do it? What was the result? And can you quantify it? If you answer those four things, you're going to be above 70% of the people. But time and time again, resumes come in and all they say, they just answer the first one. What
Mhm.
did I do? Well, I did this. I managed Excel spreadsheets. I put together a PowerPoint presentation. It just says what you did. But
Mm.
that's what everyone is saying. You're not providing enough context. And if people would take the time on a federal resume to provide the necessary context, they would see drastically different results.
I feel like you're describing the way that we would write performance reports in the military.
Exactly. Exactly. That's it.
It's funny. It's interesting whether I leave this in the podcast or not, but that way of writing clearly, because you just said it will make a difference in your federal resume. That makes a difference in almost everything. Like if you are marketing, I mean, I run a consulting business, right? So marketing is part of that, but even just sending an email to a potential client or a potential business that could hire you, if you can keep that email like short to the point and do the things that you just talked about, like, hey, this is what I can do. This is how I'll do it. Here are some metrics that metrics are really proof, right? Like, hey, I did 14,000 contracting actions, or hey, we won a $7 million contract. How do we do it? We did it by doing this. We used the sources sought method, and then the impact that it can make. And the impact of this is it, but you can cram all of that into one sentence, just like you're talking about, and really change from reading. The person reading it might not even know what hit them. You read one resume, like you said, hey, this is what, oh, this guy did X, Y, and Z. Yeah, did he really though? But this guy, for some reason, I just believe what he's saying. And the reason you believe it is just what you said: credibility, impact. You're showing impact. You're showing how he did it. Yeah. Smart.
It's really leading with value. It's as simple as that. Leading with value. Like nobody really cares about you as an individual. They care about the value you bring towards the organization. So when they're looking at it, they're not looking for a lot of fluff or a lot of I was responsible for this, I was responsible. Like who cares? People are going to sleep when you're talking about everything you're responsible for. They want to know, is your experience relevant to the position? What value have you demonstrated and can you do it for me? Because you have to prove that.
I heard that the resume that you put together for a federal job should be written for the job that you're going for. Is there any truth to that?
There is truth to that. And what I tell people normally is, okay, you're making your resume, you want to be competitive for a job. You should start your resume by targeting a job series. So out of the 300 job series, what do you want to do? Do you want to be an analyst? Do you want to be a program analyst? Not a problem. We'll open up the book. It's called the OPM Job Series Handbook. You can Google it, OPM Job Series Handbook. It's a PDF file. You open the PDF file, it has all 300 jobs there. You click on 0343, you click on it a couple of times, it'll tell you exactly what HR uses to classify the job. It's like the cheat codes. It's all right there. It
Yeah.
tells you. We're looking for somebody who can analyze and evaluate and identify data. We're looking for somebody who can advise senior management on qualitative metrics. It tells you what they're looking for. You pull that language and now you're reformatting your experience to include that language. So you're speaking the language of the job series. That's the first thing you want to do. Then you go to the job announcement, the specific job that you're targeting. You go down to specialized experience and you look at the verbs. What do they want me to do? They want me to be able to observe. They want me to be able to identify. Now, if you followed the first step, 80% of your job is done. Because if you're matching it to the job series, the chances are you're not going to have to make that many changes when it comes to the job announcement. But maybe you will. So you make a couple of tweaks. And then now you have a highly competitive resume. It's speaking the language. You're doing it in the format I just mentioned. So you're telling them what you did, how you did it. You're showing it can be quantified. You're telling them the result and it's relevant. You're using those verbs: analyze, identify, qualitative, quantitative data. You're using all of that. So you're really sending an alarm bell like, I am the candidate. You have to at least interview me because I'm speaking your language. I provide value. You're looking for a high quality individual like myself. You have to at least interview me. You're going to dramatically increase the probabilities of getting an interview. And once you get the interview, it's a whole nother strategy. You want to land the interview. And then after that, you get your job offer. A lot of people that I coach end up getting multiple job offers and they're picking the one that best suits them. Like, okay, I have Department of Labor here. I have the USDA. I have the Department of Justice. I'm going to go with Department of Labor because it's a shorter commute. I resonate more with the agency's mission, whatever the case is.
Mhm.
That's the position that you want to be in, where you have multiple options.
Yeah, absolutely. And okay, so you said some key words here, and I know we went a little bit over, but you said some of the people that you coach. So anyone listening that wants to go after one of these federal jobs, and by the way, I always recommend coaching for anything that you're trying to do, especially something like this, having somebody help you with it. Not only could be the difference between you getting the job and not, but also the difference between wasting hours and hours, maybe doing the wrong thing, something that doesn't make sense. How do they get in touch with you if they want coaching?
The best way to get in touch with me is you go to the YouTube channel, Armand Curet 1. You can go to the YouTube channel and all the links are down below in every single one of my videos. If you go to the About page, you'll see all the links down there. You can find a way to contact me on YouTube. Another way is you can go on LinkedIn. Same thing, Armand Curet on LinkedIn. You can shoot me a message and, I respond at least within 24 hours. So either way is fine.
Perfect.
And a lot of this stuff, coaching is really important, I think, for especially for individuals that don't have the time to waste and they want a proven, structured way that will get results is important. But that's not everybody, right? Some people have tons of time. And if that's the
Sure.
case, you can go through the videos and you can pull out, you can extract the parts that are pertinent to you and you can come up with your own game plan. If that's your objective is to get a government job and you want to climb, it could be GS-15. The salary right now is capped at 196,000 a year. In some agencies, it goes up to 250,000 a year. In the VA, it can go over 300,000. That's medical folks. So depending on what you're looking for, you can go to GS-15. There's people that get out of the military, let's say a lieutenant colonel, you can find your way into a GS-14. In some situations, a GS-15. Master sergeant major, you can find your way up into GS-14 in some
Sure.
situations. Now, after that, maybe you want to be an executive. We have that too, senior executive service.
Yes. Yep.
So yeah, that goes over 200,000. It's more rewarding because you're able to make a larger impact on an organization. So it has more fulfillment. So whatever your objective is, if your objective is, I want to prosper in the federal government as a career employee, or even there's political SESs. So that's an option as well. It's important to have that information, to have a roadmap. Now, if you're the type of person that wants to be a senior executive, you're the type of person that's going to find the resources in order to be successful. But what I provide is a quicker way to get there that a lot of people have taken advantage of.
Yeah, that's crucial. I tell anybody if they're looking at this, go over to whether they are or not, go over to your YouTube channel. There's a ton of great content on there. The videos are short to the point and really in detail solve problems, specific problems. Not only that, providing situational awareness on what's going on right now. You mentioned that at the beginning. Hey, what's going on with the federal job market? Armand, do you have any parting words here before we break off? Just to anyone listening that's concerned about what's happening, or because there's a lot that's happening.
Yeah, there's a lot that's happening. I will say, as of today, this is recent news. It might not be so recent when the podcast goes out, but as of right now, there's a federal judge in San Francisco that has ordered the reinstatement of thousands of probationary workers. There was a huge deal with probationary workers getting fired with the letter saying it's for performance, but in reality, it's not for performance. So the judge basically said, the agency is trying to do a RIF. And if you're doing a reduction in force, there's procedures. You can't just fire everybody with the
Right.
same copy and paste language. So we're seeing thousands of people be reinstated at the Veteran Affairs, USDA, a lot of different agencies. So that's helpful, a little bit of optimism for federal employees currently. And I would say, do not get discouraged no matter what. So listen, if you're a federal employee, it might be a good time. You want to have plan A, plan B, plan C, but keep your head down, keep doing good work, and you're going to get through this one way or the other. So do
Yeah.
not get too discouraged. If you're on the outside trying to get in, there are still opportunities, thousands of them, and there will be more, especially I would say later on this year, after the rifts have really done their damage, there will continue. The nation needs a government. Whatever
Yeah.
your political ideology is, the nation needs a government. So there is a spot here if you have the desire, right? If you have the work ethic, the right level of desire, the perseverance, the resilience, you're going to get in. You're definitely going to get in. You're going to make a difference. And that's the main message here, right? Be optimistic, keep doing the work, keep doing the iterations, don't quit, and know that there's better days ahead. And hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me, having me on. It means a lot. And thank you for that, Rick.
No, thanks, man. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for the positivity and the message. I know everyone really appreciates it. I appreciate it. And I encourage everybody, head on over to Armand's YouTube channel. We'll throw the link in here in the podcast and on when this comes out on our YouTube channel. And thanks again, man. Thanks for coming on. We'd love to have you again.
Thanks. Appreciate it.